Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. You know, in an era where artificial intelligence can draft a massive strategy document, write a nuanced essay, or solve some incredibly complex equation in literally 3 seconds, you'd probably just assume that the ultimate tool to think clearly and learn quickly is, well, a faster microchip, right? But what if the truth is actually completely counterintuitive? What if the absolute best tool to master almost anything in the age of AI is just a simple $1 pen and a piece of paper? Today, we're going to dive into the kind of forgotten skill of thinking on paper and explore how it can make you practically irreplaceable. All right, let's jump right into our masterclass today. We're going to cover 4 key things. First, the might of the pen. Second, the 3 originals. Third, beating the blank page. And finally, freedom, form, and feedback.
Starting off with Section 1, the might of the pen, and exactly why the ultimate thinking tool costs just a single dollar.
We've all heard that famous quote from the French philosopher René Descartes, right? I think, therefore I am. But I want you to really consider this for a second. If you're completely outsourcing your thinking to an AI prompt, what is actually left of you? Are we fast approaching a reality of I prompt, therefore I am? Now sure, writing's a lot slower than typing, and typing is definitely slower than prompting. But with every single step forward we take in speed, we're handing off one more layer of our critical thinking to a machine. We used to shape ideas with our own bare hands, and now we increasingly just sort of rent them from whatever the algorithm decides to spit out. When we rely solely on machines to generate our thoughts, we genuinely risk losing the very core of our own human intelligence. 7,000. That is the staggering number of handwritten pages kept by Leonardo da Vinci. We're talking books, blueprints, rough sketches, honestly, whatever he could get his hands on. Charles Darwin literally worked out the theory of evolution by drawing diagrams by hand. Now you might be thinking, well yeah, obviously, they didn't have computers back then. Fair point, but the exact same principle applies to modern leaders and thinkers today. Everyone from Nobel Prize-winning author Toni Morrison to Michelle Obama, and from Richard Branson to Sam Altman, their absolute best world-changing ideas still start on a simple piece of paper.
So why does this matter so much? Well, think about the physical contrast here. When you type on a keyboard, every single keystroke is the exact same downward physical motion. Whether you're aggressively typing out a legal brief or writing a heartfelt love letter, your finger just presses down. Boom. Identical. It's fantastic for speed, no doubt about it. But when you write by hand, every single letter is a completely unique physical experience. The pressure of the pen against the pad, the speed of the stroke, the curve of the shape, they are all entirely distinct motions.
And that brings us to the actual science behind all this. In neuroscience, this is called haptic perception. Because every handwritten letter requires a unique movement, your brain literally tags each idea with a unique sensory fingerprint. The thought doesn't just casually live on the page, it's physically rooted in your body. In fact, scientists over at NTNU, a Norwegian university, found that when we write on paper, the parts of our brain that light up are the exact same parts where learning and memory take place. And current science even shows that just the simple, seemingly mindless act of doodling by hand actually lowers your cortisol levels and reduces performance anxiety. How crazy is that?
So the crucial takeaway here is that paper gives you a massive, profound psychological and neurological advantage. Picture J.K. Rowling. She wrote the first chapters of Harry Potter completely by hand in a cafe in Edinburgh. At the time, she was an anxious single mother surviving on government benefits, armed with nothing but a single pen and a piece of paper. And from that deeply visceral, physical act of creation came a story that eventually sold over 450 million copies. That, right there, is the undeniable power of paper.
Okay, moving on to Section 2, the 3 originals, and how to reclaim your uniquely human traits.
There are 3 specific scenarios where paper just completely destroys the competition. First up is invention. When you need to generate something that literally doesn't exist yet, paper gives you the physical white space to create without any embedded criticism. There's no blinking cursor rushing you to finish your thought. Second is introspection. Whenever you're feeling stuck or just totally overwhelmed, paper acts as your external mind. It gives you a place to untangle your emotional fog, label your feelings, and just let the page carry the burden for a while. And third is intuition. To really get what I mean by that third step, intuition, let's look at a problem-solving approach famously attributed to Albert Einstein. He reportedly said that if he had 1 hour to solve a seemingly impossible problem, he'd spend 55 minutes defining the problem and just 5 minutes actually solving it. That is first principle thinking at its finest. It's about untangling the mess, asking yourself what you absolutely know to be true, and really exploring your baseline assumptions. Paper is basically the perfect medium for this deeply intuitive work. No other human, and certainly no machine, can do these three things: invention, introspection, intuition, exactly the way you do them. They're your unique fingerprints.
That brings us to Section 3, beating the blank page. Basically, staring down the void.
Now, studies from places like Princeton and UCLA clearly prove that students who take notes by hand understand concepts way more deeply than the ones who just furiously type on their laptops. But if the evidence is so overwhelmingly clear, I have to ask you this directly. Why do we freeze up at the blank page? You know the exact feeling I'm talking about. Blank page syndrome is just incredibly uncomfortable. And honestly, it's exactly what drives us straight into the arms of AI. We type a quick prompt and boom, within 3 seconds, we get 3 pristine paragraphs. It's instant relief. But here's the catch. It only relieves the symptom. It entirely ignores the underlying cause, and it makes us shy away from the hard-earned clarity that only comes from doing the mental heavy lifting ourselves.
Psychologists actually have a brilliant concept for this called desired difficulty. It essentially means that the harder your brain has to work to generate a thought, the deeper that thought gets permanently wired into your mind. So the blank page? It's a necessary struggle. Think about a master home cook who absolutely hated cooking whenever her mother-in-law was visiting and hovering right next to her in the kitchen. That story perfectly proves that our real problem isn't the blank page itself. Our real problem is our own inner judge constantly standing over our shoulder, whispering that our ideas aren't good enough.
So if you want to actually beat the blank page, you have to completely bypass the trap of trying to generate quickly formed, precise ideas. You literally need to fire those 4 inner judges. First, fire quickly. Seriously, what is the rush? Give yourself 15 to 20 minutes to just sit, stare, and think. Second, fire form. Your writing absolutely doesn't need to be well-formed. Messy, disconnected, chaotic fragments are totally great. Third, fire precise. Let it flow randomly. Be wildly imprecise. And fourth, fire ideas. You don't even need a fully baked idea to start. A vague feeling, a random question, half a phrase, or literally just a doodle. All of that counts. You don't need to stress about filling the page. You really just need to empty your mind.
All right, our final section, Section 4, freedom, form, and feedback. This is the ultimate integration loop.
Let's be totally clear here. We are absolutely not throwing our laptops out the window or abandoning AI. They aren't our rivals, they're our partners. The real secret here is sequencing these tools based on what your idea actually needs at any given moment. When your idea is in an embryonic, fragile, and messy state, what it needs most is freedom. So you go to paper. There's no autocomplete, no red squiggly lines, no blinking cursor, just quiet space to let the idea breathe. Then, when the idea finally has a pulse and it needs some structure and sequence, when it needs form, that's when you move to the keyboard. You start typing out your actual sentences. And finally, when you need some really deep research or you want to find missing logical links and refine the whole concept, when it needs feedback, that's when you take it to AI. It becomes your very own co-pilot to pressure test what you've already built. And remember, this whole thing is a continuous loop, from paper to keyboard to AI, and then right back to paper whenever you find yourself stuck again.
Think of yourself as a sculptor. A true sculptor never ever begins with the final polish. They always begin with a big, rough shape. They make those incredibly messy first cuts in total solitude, doing all that heavy lifting that nobody else ever sees. If you take your raw idea to the machine and try to polish it way too early, you're going to completely ruin the masterpiece. You have to be brave enough to make those messy first cuts yourself, on paper, long before the world or the algorithm ever gets a chance to reshape it for you.
AI is amazing. It can amplify, expand, and execute your ideas at a scale that we have literally never seen before in human history. But it cannot create that initial magical spark for you. Today, AI is already outperforming us in a lot of measurable ways, and basic intelligence is rapidly becoming a cheap commodity. So, what is it that makes you irreducibly human? It's your emotion, it's your intuition, and it's your capacity for original creation. So I want to leave you with this final thought. If AI makes intelligence a cheap commodity, what will your next rough shape be? Do yourself a favor, grab a pen, face that blank page, and find out. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.